January 1971, a case of customs fraud rocked former West Cameroon, sending some ripples across Douala to Yaoundé in the former East Cameroon. A group of businessmen based in Victoria, today Limbe, importers of second-hand clothing on a very large scale, were involved in a racket wherein they swindled the customs department by skillfully evading duties at the then Victoria port. These traders were reported to have several times taken away huge quantities of their goods without clearance at the customs. After some whistleblowing on the issue, the customs department went to work to unravel the mystery of the racket. As investigations were carried out by the customs, administrative and law enforcement officers, the media also went to work. An outstanding newspaper at the time, based in Victoria, Cameroon Outlook, followed the case closely, publishing the various stages of the investigations. The paper came up with very captivating headlines such as "Hunt for more swindlers continues. Cameroonian director nabbed. Other importers flee," and this was in its edition of Wednesday, 13th January 1971. Its edition of Thursday, January 14th, 1971, it carried a caption: "Police inspector alleged in big currency handout." On February the 26th, 1971, Cameroon Outlook had another headline story: "Swindler's wife grabbed in cargo handout." A perusal of these stories, amongst others, speaks of thorough judicial investigations, which is a far cry from what obtains today in many cases. Investigations on numerous cases today are lopsided and shrouded in a lot of doubts. Barrister Eta Besong, former president of the Cameroon Bar Association, takes on that point.
First of all, I would like to say that I know the case you are talking about so well because I was a boater boy, Victoria, at the time. And this happened where I was just out of Sase. You see, in those days, the government officers and government departments were so interrelated that it was important for the well-being of one department that the other department had to cooperate. So it was no doubt, therefore, that you found from the customs to the police to the SGO and all of them acting in protection of the law and in enhancement of the law. That was the system there. Regrettably, coming to your question, regrettably that does not appear now the case. This is so because there is a general lukewarm attitude by some of the officers, and I'll give you a case. You see, now a policeman or a gendarme officer, they call them generally OPG, Officier de Police Judiciaire, they don't find the compulsion to come to court in the first place. So you see, since there's no compulsion to come to court, they can do their job in a manner which is determined only by themselves. And they can carry out investigations lopsidedly, haphazardly, and just say, well, the case file will go to the legal department, and the legal department can do whatever it wants to do with that. You see, but if you are committed, if you know that I am in charge of this investigation, tomorrow I must go to court, I must defend the case file, I must give the evidence which I had gathered, and ensure that the investigation was thorough, you have a certain degree of consciousness to do the best for the interest of justice and to protect your job. Now, people don't care. I have handled cases, and I tell you the case files that come. I don't want to talk about most recently with the coming of the Criminal Procedure Code, but most recently, you see, it's regrettable the way investigations are handled. They are not handled thoroughly. In the 1970-71 and before 1970-71, you see, the investigations were thorough. You have to know, first of all, that in the inferior courts, like the magistrates court as they were called before the appellation was changed to court of first instance, prosecution was by policemen. We didn't have enough legally trained prosecutors to carry out prosecution. So you found gendarme officers and policemen prosecuting in our courts, now called courts of first instance. We had health officers who were prosecuting people, for health offenses, dirty compounds, absence of toilets, and all of those things. And that department ensured that if you were responsible for investigation or prosecution, you did your job thoroughly. The DOs or SDOs or and administrators in general had quasi-judicial powers. And it is good to let people know that the law empowers anybody, whether you're a police officer, you're a gendarme officer, or a civilian. The law empowers you to arrest anybody you find committing a crime in your presence. So these rules were strictly applied in the yesteryears, and so it was legal for the SDO to cause the arrest and detention and subsequent prosecution of the policeman who took bribe.
Barrister Eta, when we look at some headlines, gendarmes halt 500,000 francs bribery attempt to free swindler. Another one, 556,000 francs bribery victim in court today. And according to these headlines, some of the persons who were involved in these cases sent out agents to bribe the gendarme officers who were in Victoria at the time. Barrister Eta, the attitude of law enforcement officers. Your comment?
Yes, as I said before, I know that story very well, and I really recommend and appreciate what those gendarme officers did. You see, because 556,000 francs in 1970 and upwards was a lot of money. I'll tell you, it is worth more than 5 million francs today. But you see that people were able to stand against that type of bribery and say, well, you brought the money, we are not going to receive it, and then use that as exhibits to prosecute the people who tried to influence them to take bribe. That is strange these days. There are very few people who will do that these days. As I said, there are very few. I know cases where in a situation like that, they will take the money, now charge the people, bring some offense which is not as heavy as that, and even avoid putting a charge on trying to influence an officer to taking bribe. Because you see, giving bribe is as bad as receiving bribe. There is a giver, there is a receiver. Both of them are guilty of the offense. And for a civil servant, it's even an aggravating circumstance. Now, but today, they will readily take the money, avoid the charge, And if, you know, the facts reveal, take for example, that a person is charged with aggravated theft, you know, an aggravated theft which does not, you know, involve a death penalty or does not carry a death penalty, you know, the guy would now transform it and can bring it to simple theft, right? Because he has had some money behind. Because in simple theft, you have a penalty of from 5 to 10 years. Whereas in aggravated theft, which is not one of those that carries the death penalty, you'd have a maximum of 10 to 20 years.